the college complexes. This is our 362nd meeting since we started in February 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We have to know ahead of time what we're going to talk about. We give them up to an hour to make a presentation. If they go over an hour, we cut them off.
Sorry?
If anybody interrupts the speaker, we might interrupt or we listen only one fool at a time. That's one of our rules.
Still somebody, I want
Then we have questions and answers from the audience, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody at this podium gets 5 minutes to respond to what the speaker said for or against. This started, maybe a little history, this started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. It's evolved here in Dallas since 2009. We've had, as I mentioned, we've had 362 meetings. They've had over 3,000 meetings in Chicago. So there's only 2 in the country, Chicago and here. At one time there was college complexes in New York and in San Francisco, but they fizzled out. Chicago remained, and we started one here in Dallas. So Chicago does our website for us, so that's nice to do. But before we put a couple other things to mention, this is a new restaurant. This is our first day here for those who don't know this, and we want to stay here if we can. They're hoping that we'll stay in this section of the room up here because of our equipment, the way we set it up today. We're kind of confusing. We're allowing everybody to go where they want, but in the future we'll try to keep them up in this. Try to remember to get up in this area, and if we have too many people, then we can go in that area. But that's how it works. We don't want to hurt the restaurant's business. So just so you know. Anyway, before we put our speaker on, we have announcements. Does anybody have any announcements that they want to make? Now's the time to make them. Come on up here. Make your announcement.
Oh, go ahead. Sure, nice. Study first.
Because of a lot of anger from this group, we are asking everybody to ask one question and not grab the microphone and hog it and give us your worldview. Otherwise, become a speaker and tell us what you think. Same with the rebuttals. So just keep it short and civil, okay? Because there's a lot of people aren't coming because some of you have made them very, very angry, including me.
Well, today is another historical anniversary. I wonder if there's anyone that can tell me what it is.
What is it?
A historical anniversary.
Cinco de Mayo?
No. Well, yes. Well, Cinco de Mayo was yesterday. The Civil War ended. Not quite that far back. It was 75 years ago. Remember, General MacArthur was fighting the Japanese on on Mindanao, and they were pushed back to Corregidor Island. May the 6th, 1942 was the day that American forces and Filipino forces surrendered to the Japanese. Shortly after that, there was what was known the Bataan Death March. They marched the Filipinos and Americans 65 miles in the hot sun, no water, no food. Those who couldn't make it were shot or beheaded. 10,000 people lost their lives in that march. 1,000 of them were Americans. Today is May the 6th, 1942. This is the 75th anniversary of a very momentous day in American history. Not a propitious day, but a momentous day. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other announcements? Is that it? No more announcements? All right. Oh, yeah, I've got one here. Grover Gillette, who is a regular here, he used to say that he hoped everything wore out at the same time. That was one of his things. But he died, unfortunately. And Margaret Gillette, she's a regular here. She isn't here tonight. But I handed some of you the flyer here. There's a celebration of life of Grover Gillette, Sunday, May 23rd, 2017, 4 p.m., First Unitarian Church of Dallas, 4015 Normandy Avenue, valet parking provided, Dallas, Texas. Reception, May 23rd, Sunday. So reception is in the chanting hall to follow. Your presence at the celebration is your gift. However, if you feel you must give something more, please donate to Love First campaign, First Unitarian Church of Dallas, or Society of St. Vincent de Paul Holy Trinity Conference. Anyway, I handed these out to you. I think most of you have them. So May 23rd is a Sunday. Or May 21st. Did I say the 23rd? May 21st? I read this wrong. May 21st is the date. It should be. May 21st is the Sunday. Okay. Any other announcements?
It's too loud here and it's disturbing people.
Oh, turn it down. Wait a minute.
He's very loud. This is when they get it.
All right, I'll try to not to speak into the microphone. Next week, May 13th, we have drug war and how we got into this mess and the vested interests that keep us here. Suzanne Wills, she's a retired CPA whose advocacy is drug policy reform. She'll be our speaker. I'm not going to read all this to you, but that's next week. Should be interesting. On May 28th, Catherine Savers McGovern, retired Assistant U.S. Attorney and United States Attorney Dallas and Democratic nominee U.S. Congress District 32. She'll be talking about on the counter-democracy impact of the Trump administration's deconstruction plan. It's on your itinerary there. I'm not going to read all this, but it should be interesting. Our next open date for a speaker is June 3rd. If anybody's interested, let me know. And our speaker tonight is John Edmonton. He's going to talk about on accomplishing essential body-mind connections to ensure good health. He's an MS, LPC-S, longtime educator and current project manager for Vascular Management Associates, a for-profit company with a very important objective to prevent surgery and heart disease through good nutrition and stress reduction. He will discuss the body-mind connections of how our mind, choices, and stresses are all factors in our health. He will argue that our thoughts and emotions do affect our physical health, while the body at the same time affects the mind. John's advocacy is to get this knowledge out to the world as a preventative before people become sick. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to John Edmondson.
So, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we don't want to be too.
So not too close, not too far away. Y'all give me the signal and I'll move forward or backwards a little bit. So thank you for letting me be here today. I'm really excited to talk about this. So Vascular Management Associates is the management company. I'm with Marula Medical. And our objective, in a nutshell, is to help people extend their lives and make that life worth living. There's 2 floors where I work. On the 7th floor, Pavilion 2, Methodist, Dallas. We're the prevention center. And we see people, we would do diet, mindfulness, exercise, all these different factors to help people improve their lives. On the 6th floor is the vascular suite, and that's where the surgery happens. And I go down there almost every day to talk to different people and representatives that are there. And I get to see the people coming in and out of the surgery. And when I'm down there, it's my motivation is to help people recover as best they can from those experiences with their heart, and in many cases, prevent it in the first place. And that's our goal and our mission. There's many ways we do that. We can talk about all of them, debate all of them, but tonight it's going to be just about the body and the mind. Just about how our mind and our emotions affect our health. So I have a quote up here, and I really like it's by Nelson Mandela. I think we all know who he is, a phenomenal man. And when he passed away, he was well over 93 and had energy the whole time and went through tremendous things, but he still looked really good from beginning to end. So there's a quote here. It says, "A good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination." And that's exactly what I want to preach on and talk about tonight is when your mind is connected and doing really well, your body's going to feel better. When your body is healthy, your mind is going to feel better at the same time. So let's take a look at this though and think about it some. If we can go to our next slide. So I think, in my opinion, we've got it wrong for a long time. It's just habit. It's just human nature. We are slow for change. We're slow to really accept what's going on and what's happening and wait almost to the last minute. You know, we thought that planes wouldn't fly. I mean, that kept us safe, but didn't keep us innovative. We thought the world was flat. That kept us safe, but didn't help us travel or do anything else. We thought a computer named after a fruit, well, that's not going anywhere. What are we doing with that? And then we had this idea that our mind and our body are separate. It's interesting. So let's look at the exact definition of the mind so it helps it out a little bit. If we can go to the next slide. So here we are, and we're looking at the mind. And I looked up lots of definitions for this. I was a clinical coordinator for a while at Momentous Institute, which is a wonderful youth and family center. And when I was there, I had the opportunity to meet all these different professors on the mind, Harvard experts on brain, neurobiology, and I'll probably quote them some tonight, and all these different functions. They had a great definition of the mind, but then I thought, let's keep it simple tonight. So tonight when I talk about the mind, I'm talking about you. Well, I guess me too, right? So our thoughts, our actions, our choices, the way that we interpret the world around us. For tonight, although there's a great Harvard definition for the mind, and it's very complex, tonight that's going to be my definition. So when you come up and rebuttal and talk, let's include it on that. Now when I talk about the body, there's a whole lot to that, but just to keep it simple, let's talk about health. Let's talk about the actual shape of our bodies, and let's talk about how our body performs. So let's take a look at the next slide and get into this a little bit. So there's Nelson Mandela again. And when we think of people that are really healthy, we think about, maybe how they look right in that moment and don't notice all the things that maybe help them get started. So let's take a look at that. So there he is. He's young, he's cute, like many of us when we started out, right? We had energy, we had excitement for the world. Everything was an opportunity. Everything was exciting. Everything was something we wanted to be inquisitive about. And we were that way because of nature. We were designed to be that way because we're forming our minds. We understand about the human brain, and all of us know this, is that it's growing and changing when we're kids. And we're forming our reality based on our experiences. So some of us live in great neighborhoods, some rough neighborhoods, some of us had amazing parents, some of us had parents who had challenges. All that affected our minds as we grew up and who we are today. Now we all know that, because we're all adults now. We've experienced that. We could probably trace things that happened to us 20, 30 years ago to how we think today. Sure. But what's really interesting is that process never stops. The brain never stops shifting, never stops changing, and never stops adapting. And it's all based off of our thoughts, our actions, well, let's just say our habits. So if you ask these Harvard professors, they'll talk about the big word, neuroplasticity. It just means the brain's plastic. It means you can shift it and change it a little bit. They did studies on it. And they can tell you, based off of whether you're playing video games or you're meditating or you're working construction, your brain is going to shift and actually be formed differently. So I guess that's my first argument, the beginning of talking about how the mind affects the body. Because when I talk about the brain, I'm saying that human brain is part of our body. It's right here, it's within us. And those thoughts and those choices that we make affect that brain, affect how it's shaped, how it grows, how it moves. But there's so much more. So let's continue to this one. If you want to read a little bit about it, there's a great book called Buddha's Brain, and it's by Dr. Rick Henson. And there's many of them out there. I almost wish he had chosen a different title, because then it makes it sound like there's something about Buddhism. But really what he did was he looked at people who meditate. And that's not even a good word. Let's say people who did focused attention, who took time to breathe, took time to concentrate, and work with their mind. And he noticed that when they did that, those studies we talked about a minute ago, their brain changed. The front part or the back part, depending on what the activity was, it began to shift or become different. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the idea of here's some science, here's some ideas behind it. What I want to do now, those who are willing, I'm going to ask you to participate with me in a real easy and quick activity. Let's test something out to see if our body affects our emotions a little bit, our mind, it affects us. Is that even possible? I don't know, let's try it real quick. So those of you who are willing, what I'm going to ask you to do, you see the face right here. This guy, he looks like he's having a bad day. Can you, we've had that day before, haven't we? So let's think about that day for a minute. Can you make a face like that for me? Yeah. And get that. Oh, some of you are really into it. And maybe tense your shoulders and your teeth a little bit, and I want you to say something with me on 3. Have a nice day. Say it with me. 1, 2, 3. Have a nice day. Woo. I'll definitely stay a little bit farther back now. So let's notice that for a minute. It's kind of hard. You know, we're laughing or being silly, but we've all had that expression on our face before, and we all know how we feel when we do it. Let's try something different now. Now we see. Oh, keep it going this one. But thank you. Move a little bit too fast. So if you could have your hands like this, or any way comfortable, and try to smile. Those of you who like to smile. Oh, I see some great smiles out there. Y'all are wonderful. Now say it with me together. Have a nice day. Here we go. Have a nice day. Wow. Something looked different about you when you did that. And there are hundreds of people I've done this test on. They almost all, now some people do, some people don't, say the same thing. When I grit my teeth, when I make that face, when I do that, I almost kind of feel angry. And it's hard for me to really feel what I'm saying, to say have a nice day. And they tell me the other thing too is that when I smile like that and I relax my arms some, that I feel kind of happy and a little bit better. So it's an interesting just test of how just your body language, because that's what it says up there, the body language goes in both directions, doesn't it? So how I hold my body, how I posture myself when I look at you affects you. We already knew that. We were taught that since we were young. But then the part that we sometimes aren't taught is that body posture. The way we hold our face, the way we walk, the way we talk also affects us. And that's exciting because when we begin to learn about that, then we have options to change. So let's continue a little bit. So back to stats. Because we've got to have some hard data here if we're going to make an argument for the body affects the mind affects the body. So they did this study, and it was done over a very long period of time. And I learned about this. I was a clinical director at Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. And the mission there was really helping children recover from trauma and all the things that happen in their lives. And we came across this study, we presented on it because we wanted to get a grant to really produce more therapy and more support for kids. So when something bad happens to them, we don't just say, okay, run along, you'll be fine. Well, this study told us basically that when people go through ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and if they go through enough of them, and the average is 6, and they have a list of what these adverse are. Like it could be a family who has addiction, it could be abandonment, it could be violence, or a home with mental illness, all these things that maybe we've either seen, known, or experienced. If you have enough of those, when they looked at this study, they go, you know what? People who have enough of those experiences live sometimes 20 years less than others. Billions of dollars every year are spent on those people, those of us that have had those adverse childhood experiences. Now, why does this kind of coordinate with what I talked about? The mind affects the body, the body affects the mind. Nothing else was different in the factors. They looked at everything. The only factor was that they had this experience which traumatized them when they were younger. And then that caused mental illness, that caused stress, that caused childhood PTSD, that caused anxiety. And because of those experiences, the way they viewed the world after that, and the stress they felt, that affected their health, their choices, the food they ate, the way that they lived, the alcohol they drank. And it all started from an experience that happened to them and then later stayed inside their mind. So that's pretty heavy. So let's talk about some hope here for a minute. Let's go to the next slide. So before we get to that hope, let's talk a little bit more of this one. This is back to the brain. And to keep it not too technical, basically they say that people who are highly stressed, and we'll look at that in 2 different ways, tend to have more trouble with their heart. Again, I'm cardiovascular prevention. That's what we do all day long. We try to prevent these things. So we'll give you some ideas on how to prevent it later on. But this study basically says there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. All you need to know about it for tonight is it's about the emotion. It's about fight, flight, or freeze. So people that have overstimulation in that part of their brain, the part of the brain that's about emotion, have a tendency to have more trouble with their heart. That's interesting. Let's look at the next slide. So here we are again, we're talking about the heart. And there's a lot of words up here. I'll just give you the basic idea of it. So, they did a study, and what they looked at was that people who have stress over a 10-year period, although some of us have stress more than 10 years, they have the tendency to have, if it's not helped or not supported, have more likely, 27% more likely to have trouble with their heart. Nothing's happening on the outside. We're not talking about their diet. We're not talking about environment, all these other things. Just the mind. Just their experience that they had and the way that they interpreted it and the stress that they felt. 27% more likely to have trouble with their heart. Interesting. So maybe the body and the mind, they are connected more than we thought. But there's hope. On the same slide, it talks about how if you do what we call mindfulness or stress reduction or learn to manage stress differently, although you're still going to feel it, stress is actually not bad or good. We may talk about that in a minute. But your ability to manage it, to reduce it, and not let it dominate your thoughts and your life, if you're able to do that, you're 27% less likely to have trouble with your heart. I think that's amazing. So then it goes in the both directions. If there's too much stress, your heart's going to have trouble. If you reduce that stress, your heart's going to be better, more likely. I said 27%, so there's other things we have to look at as well. So let's look at that next slide. So this one talks about specific. So I said 27% people less likely to have heart trouble. Well, this is a study that was done by Harvard, and it was a blog that they released actually years ago. And by the way, a lot of these have been released years and years ago. This idea that the brain can shift and change corner thoughts, they were thinking about that in the early 1800s. The stress and correlation, that was hundreds of years ago. They began to think about that. But now we're actually proving it, and through science. So Harvard did a study, and they had people practice mindfulness. Now, to define that easily, because we're not talking about Eastern religion, we're talking about the ability to be present in the moment, the breathing and centering of your body and your mind, and focusing your attention, ended up having them lower their blood pressure significantly. Just by doing that. No new medications, no change in diet, no change in life situation, only the change in the mind, right in here. So that's a lot to take in. In a minute, I'm going to do some more activities so you can take a breather and take a break. But has anyone here heard about the type A personality? I see some nods in there. Okay. You heard of the type B? Some, less nods. Anyone heard of the type C? Almost no. There's actually a D now. We're not going to go to D. Let's stick with the ABCs for today. So you've heard about type A. And type A, you've probably heard this before, people a little bit more high-strung. And so we'll point to who we can guess which one that is over here. So they're actually sometimes very good taskmasters. They're sometimes CEOs. They're very productive individuals. Probably have some difficulty, though, being able to manage their stress. And have you ever talked to someone before, and I've heard this language because it's funny how we talk sometimes, we know things intuitively. Like, that person's a pain in the neck, that kind of thing. Or, calm down, you're going to give yourself heart attack. We've said that before. We knew at some level. Those type A's, and I love them because we need them in the world. They're very productive people. They have a tendency, through statistics, like literally we can tell you, they're more likely to have heart trouble. They're more likely to have heart attacks. So, wow. Just because of your personality type, the choices you make, just because of your thinking and the way you manage your stress, you're more likely to affect your heart. So we knew type A, but no one here knew about type C though, right? So we know type C. So one of the things I really like to do is teach, and I love to be in front of groups, and I love doing classes. And I sound like a teacher, don't I? One of the things I had the honor of doing at my practice was running a support group for survivors of breast cancer. And there were 20 phenomenal women in there who were very brave, very courageous, very smart, and really took their health, straight on. And I ran something similar like this, and I talked about stress reduction, and I talked about all these ideas. And all of them said, man, I wish I had known about this before I started my treatment. And then one person in there said, I wish I had known about this before I even had cancer. So when I talk about this, that's part of that importance of it, because type C, some people say is the cancer personality. A personality that's cancer, a personality that's heart attack? What? Well, it's just about who we are and how we perceive the world and how we act. And if someone doesn't help us change, then we keep going down that road. Type C personality is somebody who, because you probably haven't heard of this one, they look, well, you can't see it from here, but this person's smiling right there, a little bit of a mask, but behind that, there's someone who's looking really sad. The other person, they look okay on the outside, but they're not happy on the inside. Doesn't that make sense for the idea of health? And on the inside, they're suffering. They're the kind of person who says yes to everything. Not the adventurous yes, but yes to being asked to do things. Yes, 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 yes. You need this? I'll help you. I'll be here for you. I'll be here for you. I'll be here for you. I'll do it. Nothing wrong with helping people. That's actually wonderful. I'm the same way. But when we can't say no, when we don't take care of our own bodies, we sacrifice our health, we're falling into that type C category. That doesn't mean that everybody who's overly helpful is going to have cancer. But there is a statistic pattern they see with many. Just like the pattern, not everybody who's stressed out or of type A is going to have heart trouble, but there's a pattern there where many of them do. Do you want to hear about type B? Let's look at that one. Well, actually, type B is the one who's a little bit in between. They don't tend to get too stressed. They don't tend to overgive. They don't tend to suffer too much on the inside or on the outside. And they're noticeably people who tend to be much more healthy overall. So isn't that interesting that our personality type can affect our health like that? The body and the mind connection. So I've given you a lot of different ideas so far of how your personality can affect your health, how stress can affect your health. I think it's about time I give you an activity to help you reduce your stress, since I've talked about it so much. Let's take a look. All right. So we could do the science first, or we could do the activity first. I'm wondering which one's the best. Maybe we'll try the activity first. So here we go again. We tried the nice day earlier. We did the smile. So with this one, it's very simple. I'm going to ask you to breathe. I hope you're also doing that right now. This one's different, though. I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath in 3 times and breathe out slowly. And then I promise you I'll tell you the science behind it and how it works and how it helps you. You don't have to do it, but if you would, join me. We'll do it together. So take a deep breath in through your nose. Breathe out through your mouth. Y'all are really good at this. The trick is breathe out longer than you breathe in. I'll tell you a little more about that. Breathe in through your nose. Out through your mouth as long as you can comfortably. One more time. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. Take a moment, notice how you feel. When I look around, I see a couple faces look a little bit more relaxed. When I was a high school teacher, this was the best trick in the book. You ever told kids to calm down? It doesn't work very well. But if you say, hey, let's take a breath together, the vast majority of them would begin to relax, feel more calm and more centered. When I worked with agencies, people who've been through trauma, been through all these difficulties, that's the exact technique we'd use, because almost every time they'd calm down. Now here's what's interesting. We've been talking about how the mind affects the body so far. Your thoughts, your stress, your personality, it's affecting your body, affecting your body. Now we're flipping the switch. Now we're talking about how your body affects your mind. Now we're talking about how to put power back in your hands to feel better. So here's why that works. In most cases, if it doesn't, there's an explanation behind that too, and we can talk about it. When you breathe in, that's like the gas. Like getting energy, potentiality. You ever been startled before? And what do you do when you're startled? Many people, you've seen someone, they breathe in, right? They go, and they pull in like that. Well, that's a natural response to help us survive. If we didn't have that, we'd be in big trouble and we wouldn't even be here today. So it gives us energy, get us ready to go. Now, what do people do? Either you or people you've seen when it's all over, you know it's okay. We take that deep breath out. So the reason behind that is when you breathe in, you're giving a signal to your body to have energy, to move forward. When you breathe out, you're giving a signal to your body and your mind that everything is okay. It has nothing to do with your thoughts, nothing to do with anything around you, nothing perception. Just your sympathetic nervous system, which is when you breathe out, gets activated. It helps you calm, it helps you center. Let's talk a little bit more, some other options we have here. Anyone who watched the Olympics? We got a couple of hands. Okay. Some yes, some no. I watch it sometimes. What's something you see almost all Olympic athletes do before they begin? It's getting ready. They're walking up either before or after. So many of them, I see them close their eyes for a second and maybe take a deep breath. Well, they're probably doing that centering. They're probably doing that calming, but they're also visualizing the outcome that they want. Studies have proven this, and that's why they do it. Olympic athletes, Navy SEALs, they all, and corporate CEOs, all now practice visualization. They close their eyes, they think about what they want, and they rehearse it over and over and over again. And they feel the emotion of it when they do it. Now, why is that? It's because the brain doesn't know the difference between what is real and what's not when they see it. If you've seen a horror movie, you'll jump. You see a love story, you cry. It's not real. It's just on a screen. But your mind believes it. Same thing when you close your eyes. You visualize your health, you're much more likely to feel healthy. If you visualize the stresses and worries in your world, you're much more likely not to feel so healthy, not to feel so good. We won't do that one here today because of time, but you might test it out at home. Close your eyes and think about not feeling good and see what happens. Then later close your eyes and think about feeling great. Think about the health that you want. Think about something good and see what happens there and test it out. So let's take it a step further. On this, we're still on this slide. I'll go back one. Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to step away for a second and point right there. What is going on with that? John, we said we're not going to talk about religion, and I see a monk, and he's sitting there, and what are they doing? Well, what's happening now in our society is, in my opinion, the second renaissance. All this information, all this knowledge is coming out. And we're learning about it. We're taking it from everywhere to see how to help people. So we're not just saying, let's do religion, let's do Buddhism, not at all. But with scientists, in this case, Dr. Richard Davidson, is studying how those practices they do, when they close their eyes and they concentrate and they meditate and they do all these different mantras and ideas, what's happening? Is there anything really happening? Well, he tried to find out. So he put him in an fMRI, and basically that's a real-time model of the brain. He's in there, he scoots on in, you can see his brain on a screen, you can see the blood flow that's going in and out of this monk's brain, or how it's moving in the brain. And then they get on the mic and they say, okay, I want you to meditate on compassion. And they watched his brain, and it changed in that moment. The blood flow, how it was going, just right then, from that concentration, that meditation. So if it isn't just the SEALs do it, the corporate CEOs are doing it, Olympic athletes are doing it, monks are doing it, and changing the blood flow of their brain, the question mark over there is, why are we not doing that? Why are we not thinking about how the body affects the mind affects the body, and how we can use our concentration to improve our health? So if we go to the next slide, that's that recommendation. Test it out. See if you feel a difference. So I know we're going to talk in a little while and share and point and counterpoint, but I think some of the examination is going to be at home. I think testing this out over 2 or 3 weeks and then make that real decision. Doing that breathing, doing that visualization. Let's take a look together. But I have more for you. Let's see how the body can affect us. Let's go to the next slide. So body chemistry. We're not talking about necessarily the romance part of that. We're talking about the chemistry inside of our bodies. Everything that happens, everything that comes out, all things we experience are based off of neurochemicals, neurotransmitters that are in there. We won't get too deep on that. Let's talk just about 1 or 2 of them. So just show of hands, who here has ever been stressed before? Oh, just a few? Okay. Me neither. I never get stressed. But you may know someone who's been stressed out before. And how do they look? Look like that picture from before a little bit, right? There's some gritting of the teeth. There's tension in the muscles. There's difficulty concentrating. Usually when we tend to say and do things we don't normally say or do, something comes out. Part of the reason is that whenever we get really stressed, cortisol gets released in our body. That helps us survive. When we get attacked, that cortisol, that potential, that energy gets released into our body and helps us become more active. That's great. The challenge is, because of our minds, because of how we interpret the world, sometimes we hold on to those memories too long. Sometimes we interpret things that aren't a danger, aren't a worry, as a worry. Then that cortisol comes out again because the brain thinks, oh, I need to help you. Oh, I need to give you energy. I need to help you survive. And so we feel that tension. We could talk about a lot of these, but I want to jump down to another one, which is oxytocin. Has anyone ever been in love before? I see some nods. You seem like a cute baby. And what do you do when you see him? Yeah, it's like everything changes. You feel a bit more connected. Yeah. Well, part of what's happening to you is that oxytocin is getting released into your body. Now, nothing's happened to your body in that moment, but because you feel love, you feel connection, your body's responding to it. What's really interesting is you can actually push a button to bring that out in yourself, and it counterreacts that cortisol, that stress, that frustration, that worry. So we're going to test it out again. This is going to be one of the last experiments we're going to do today. So if you would, take your right hand, those who are willing, put it on your heart. We're not going to do a pledge, although the pledge is wonderful. I pledge I will be more relaxed. No. So what I want you to do is have your hand here for a second, and let's just breathe normally and relax. So here's the idea behind it. We're testing about the body-mind connection right now. Sometimes we can think and calm ourselves down. Sometimes we change our point of view. That affects our stress. That affects whether or not cortisol gets released in our body. That affects whether or not our heart rate goes up. We change the way we view things. But then another piece is when we have social connection, we hug, we connect, we kiss, we feel different. When we put a hand on our heart, your brain doesn't know the difference. It registers it as social touch. And then it begins to release oxytocin in your system. And then your breathing begins to change. And your body begins to change just because you put your hand on your heart. And just because you connect it. And I'm hearing that music in the background. It kind of matches the idea of love there. A little bit. We should sway when we do it.
Is this your music or from the restaurant?
Yeah, I put this one on actually. I had it planned a little bit. No, that'd be great if I had. Let's look at a few more. So you can relax if you want. Or if you want to keep it there, please do. It's a great song. Let's go to the next slide. So again, test it out. Increase your oxytocin. Maybe 3 hugs a day. Maybe a hand on someone's shoulder. Or maybe at the bare minimum, eye contact. You know, they have these wheels. They talk about, and I wish I had a great picture of this one for you, but they have a wheel of all the factors that go into our health. So like smoking, diet, stress, we're talking about that one today. Another one that's just now getting added to that wheel is connection. The more connected we are to other people, the healthier we're going to be. So I'll leave that thought for now. Let's go back. So this is one of my final slides. And going back to that idea, we experimented here together for about 30 minutes. And we talked about how the mind and body are connected. We tested it out a little bit. We gritted our teeth. We relaxed. We did some breathing. We saw how that might have felt. We did a hand and a heart. And we felt the difference. We talked about some stats. We talked about how some people, if they don't manage their stress, are more likely to have heart trouble. Or people that do manage their stress better are less likely to have it. So if I was going to leave you with a thought, it's, if nothing else, try these things out during the week and test them out for yourself and see if it's true for you and you feel different. And last slide. And I know we're going to get up and talk a little about before, but if there was anything you heard that was helpful to you, I would invite you to pass it on. 2 reasons. 1, that's how we change the world. That's how we help people. 2, when you help other people, guess what happens? Those neurochemicals, that body chemistry begins to start over again and you begin to feel good. So anyway, with that, I'll thank you and I look forward to your questions. Stay there.
Stay there. Who wants to be first?
You mentioned a professional term, brain plasticity.
Yes.
Is there a difference between brain plasticity and brain elasticity in the professional literature?
Oh, that's an amazing question. I would say my first response is no. I think when they talk about plasticity or elasticity, its ability to shift, it's the same idea. And so basically it's just stating that you can adjust your brain in real time according to your experiences in your mind.
Hi, you were talking about childhood and stresses, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you do these studies, were they based on certain ethnic groups? Or was it
a mix of different people when you talk about how stress,
Mm.
because being born black in this country
It's different.
is horrible. It causes
Mm.
children all the way into their adulthood to be stressed.
It's a great question. This study was actually done, not by us, it was done many years ago. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you my email address and I'll forward the information to you. It was very complex, the way they went through it.
Okay.
So as I understand it, it wasn't contingent on African American versus Latino or other groups,
Oh, yeah, I know.
but more about the experience itself and those factors of stress.
You pretty well answered my question. You do have some contact information. I was wanting to know, within the resources that you endeavor during your day, if you have resources available to learn more about the different brain chemicals. I came across one called prolactin,
Hmm.
and I was wanting to know more about that. And you do have contact information available that
I do, and I have some friends that are they're the experts in the neurobiology. I'll see if I can get you connected with them.
thank you very much.
Sure. I'm more on the application side. They're more on the research side.
I know that's not much of a question.
Still a good
Thank
one.
you.
Mm.
Have you, excuse me, have you looked in those areas that they call the blue zones in the world where people live much longer than everywhere else?
I love that question. You know, where I've seen the blue zones, the studies that I've seen was through a presentation that was created by Dr. Esselstyn. And the factor that, well, I heard it through that presentation, but it's through other places as well, is a lot of it's diet. And they talk about the American diet versus other diets and a plant-based diet. But I do know that a lot of times in certain areas where there's high levels of connection, where people live almost 100 years, that's a big factor as well. It's a great question.
We have two small boxes.
Do you think pets like horses, dogs, cats, maybe farm animals, if you kind of treat them as a pet or part of the family, do you think they have an effect on blood pressure and longevity?
So they actually have equestrian therapy where people are connected to horses as a way to help them. They even have, there's a movie that came out, it's called, I want to say it's The Horse Boy, but it was by Dr. Christian Neff and her son who has autism, and they actually traveled to another country and did an experiment with that where they were on horses all day and it helped improve autism. They also have therapeutic dogs. They'll come to different areas to help people work through their stress. And I believe it 100%. Connection, it's a pet, that always makes a big difference in your health.
Is it? I'll get you next time.
Yes, sir.
Just curious, how much of the mind-body connection is related to the kind of thoughts and the quality of thoughts that we think? In the writings of Solomon, he said, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he."
Mm-hmm.
Then the New Testament, it gives a list of things that we're supposed to think upon. Which of things are true, honest, just, lovely, beautiful, noble, praiseworthy, excellent. To think upon or dwell upon or cogitate upon or focus in upon or lock in upon these type of things, and how that would affect a person's health in all areas.
I think I heard the question, it's does our thinking, kind of our character, our behavior, what we focus on affect our bodies or our health? And if I heard it that way, then I would say that yes. That's a major factor in how we feel every day, how we perceive the world, how we interpret it. People who have a sense of purpose tend to be much more physically healthy than people who aren't. People that live according to how they feel is right. And it could be what's right for everyone is different, but when people feel like they're congruent with who they are and what they believe, then they tend to be much more healthy emotionally and then thus much more healthy physically as well.
About the type C personality
Yes.
you mentioned, I have a couple of friends that smile all the time, and they don't want to hear anything that's not nice. They don't go to any movies where there's any killing or anything, and they wouldn't come here because they're afraid they'll hear something they don't want to hear. And is that, do you think they are type C personality and that they have a complex background and that they really are trying?
It could depend. And without meeting someone, it's hard to say who and what they are. I wouldn't necessarily call that type C. There's type D, and that's the disregard personality. People who actually want to be away from others and not necessarily connect. But if their overall view is positivity, like I just want to feel good and see things that are healthy and maybe happy, then that wouldn't be necessarily, that'd be more like a type B. I'm just trying to take care of myself. Type C would be on the inside, there's something else. They're smiling, but you can tell or you feel there's something else going on.
Both of the people that I'm thinking about have had psychotherapy where the therapist said, take care of yourself.
Right. And that'd be a good example of that. They want to go to certain movies, they want to be on certain areas, anywhere where they don't feel good. Whereas other people may come here and feel great, or come to a debate and feel great, or go to an action movie and feel great. Then that's what they should do.
You didn't speak very much about exercise. Is there something that you emphasize in the way of exercise to relieve the tension?
Sure. Going back to the idea of the neurochemistry and what gets released in our body, when we exercise, we release a lot of different chemicals that help us cope with that stress, so we don't feel all that physical pain in that moment. So we talk about the runner's high and what that feels like, or anybody who laughs really hard, you feel kind of more relaxed afterwards. Cardiovascular exercise is usually a pretty good one for that, as long as you've checked with your doctor, you make it okay. Anything that gets your heart rate up for over 20 minutes is good for your heart, which means you have better blood flow, which means you think much more clear and feel better overall. Anything that gets you breathing is also really good. And of course, yoga or Tai Chi.
Is there a theoretical interface between these different personality types that you're talking about and the Myers-Briggs personality indicator type, 4 types?
That's a good question. I'll look up some information and I want to send it to you before I answer it. That's some great questions. I got the smart group tonight. Myers-Briggs.
I didn't hear you refer much to the difference in living in a mechanical, technological society like we do and living out with nature. That was one of the big differences also in the blue zone. These people were off the grid, so to speak.
I think it's a great point. And I would say, as an overall statement, being in nature is way more healthy for you in general. It's going to lower your stress. And the colors blue and green have a natural effect on the body and the mind, which is calm you. And when you're out in nature, that's a lot of what you're seeing. But then you're hearing birds, you're around different things, you're not having all the noise and disruptiveness. And so it makes perfect sense, and I would recommend that to anybody.
I may be going into a whole separate field of study, but have you encountered any information in this study about the effects of day and night and how different people feel better? Like, for example, I am not a day person. I am not human until about 7 p.m. Have you heard anything about that with the brain chemistry and the health and how people feel at different hours?
I'm sure there's research about it. The very basic one talks about seasonal affective disorder. It's a very general interpretation of that. So, for example, places where it's constant daylight versus places where it's constant nighttime. In nighttime, you're going to see much more people with depression and suicide rates. Now, specific to each individual, I'm sure there's studies on the circadian rhythm and how that affects people, but I don't have those with me.
It's not related.
It could be. No, it very well could be. I would not rule that out. I mean, in a general way, as a therapist, any experience we have affects the way we live. And so if we were growing up and our tradition was to wake up very early and that's what we always did, that's probably a habit. Or if something negative happened to us at night, then we're probably going to have difficulty sleeping. Anyone who's experienced trauma will not want to go to sleep or won't sleep well. So there's some basic answers to it. It's a great question. Yeah.
I think we're out of questions.
We're out of questions.
Yeah, good to sit down.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk, so whatever you come on up here, whoever wants to comment. You got up to 5 minutes to comment either for or against what the speaker had to say. Who wants to be first?
I'll say something.
Come on up here.
I would like to corroborate what John said, and I'll tell you my experience. When I got older, most of you don't have to worry about this, but when I got older, I realized that when we get older, our lip muscles, our mouth muscles droop, and we look like we're mad when we're really not. So I decided that when I go out, I would smile. And it has made a really different experience for me. When I'm walking down the street or in the grocery store or something, I have a smile on my face, and almost everybody looks at me and smiles, and some of them talk to me. You know, they say, "Good morning, and how are you?" And black men will say, "Hi, Mama, how you doing?" And, you know, it's really nice. It's much more fun to go shopping now and be out.
Thank you.
Did anybody hear NPR this morning about Russia and McDonald's being set up in Russia in the 90s?
Yes.
And they had to teach people, the biggest problem they had was not the hamburgers, not the price, is that the Russian people have endured so much strife and misery and, you know, invasions that they never smile. And they had to send their team from Chicago, from Illinois, up into Moscow to teach them to say, "Have a nice day. Would you like French fries with your hamburger?" You know, the things, and they were saying that Americans are just such phonies. They smile all the time, but that's what McDonald's wanted. And it really, I think their opening day, they had 30,000 people, you know, come to the first McDonald's. And I thought it was very interesting that it was McDonald's that taught the Russians to smile.
Well, this is not really a rebuttal or anything. It's more fattiest than anything else. But what is that chemical you said that was oxytocins that make oxytocin? Do pheromones have anything to do with that too? There used to be. You remember the DuPont Chemical Company? I guess they don't know if they use this slogan anymore, but you know, for many years their slogan was "Better living through chemistry." And when I was in college, which was in the '60s, some wag came up with a poster that showed a black silhouette of a young man and a young woman embracing with the phrase under it, "Better living through chemistry." That's probably true. Funny that you mentioned Russia. I had a little opportunity to go to Russia in the 1995, I think, and it was with a religious group. So we were passing out books that had of a religious nature. But I've never been in a country or a state or any place where people would just literally mob you and to take the book without even really thinking what it was. It is true their culture is very, very different, and they suffered a lot, and they were deprived, and they know it. We took a train from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and we'd stop at the station every once in a while, and I'd just get up and walk to the door of the train, and there would be somebody, and I would hand them a little book. They would take it, and it wasn't 60 seconds before there was a line. That happened twice. So the Russian people have indeed suffered in more ways than we could ever imagine. both through invasions and through a totalitarian government. And I'm not surprised. I think that they are, per capita, they consume a lot more alcohol than we do, and they tend to smoke a lot more. And I think a lot of that is just a normal human reaction to very unhappiness.
Well, I can make a comment or two, I guess. Speaking of Russia, I think that we need to start focusing on the fact that in this world today, and with all the movements going on in it, the American people and the Russian people need to realize they have a lot more in common than in difference. And I think that would be one of the greatest allies that we could cultivate if we can do it. And it would lead to a great deal of peace in this world, because the Russian government has run this international banking system out of their country. And of course, we know that Iceland did that, and Hungary has done that, and we need to do that as well. Anyway, that's another subject. I think that being close to nature is probably the one most deprived point that we experience in this modern world. Man and nature must blend if we're going to survive on this planet. And the way we're headed now, with massive overpopulation for the responsibility that we have in not polluting the planet and exterminating all kinds of wildlife and so forth, it's just totally a responsibility. I think that we need to learn to blend more with nature and be less willful and aggressive, and modify ourselves more in the direction of the natural rhythms of this world. There was a study recently done about frequencies that are in nature, and there are very few places in the world today where it is calm and quiet enough without technological frequency interference that it is nature. And they have noticed that certain fundamental frequencies, when an airplane flies over, they stop. And they stop for some time until that airplane is gone and it's back to the normal frequencies in life. And a lot of the wildlife that we have in this world is far, far more intelligent than we would ever think in our left brain way of processing things. I was reading years ago about a study done by a group of scientists with the Navy who were trying to train dolphins to do military duties, like take a bomb and plant it on a ship and things like that. These scientists freaked out and shut down their experiment because they realized clearly that dolphins are more highly intelligent than humans. They don't have the hands, they can't do all the manipulation and build things like we can, but they felt they were far more intelligent. And they're just endless stories of dolphins saving the lives of humans, chasing off sharks and taking people and bringing them to shore. There was one beautiful little story. There were some fishermen who went out in a boat off of the west coast of Africa, and they were out there fishing in a little open boat. Bad weather came in, rough, stormy weather. They feared they would be driven into the rocks along a shore, and it killed, that they couldn't survive it. But in the middle of the night, a pod of dolphins came up, and they started bumping and nudging the boat, and they did that all evening until things calmed down, and then sunlight came for the morning. The mist, the fog cleared out, and they realized that those dolphins had moved their boat like 7 or 8 miles back up to the little harbor out of which they had come. I think it is very important that we get back to nature and love animals and take care of them and be as considerate of them as man's best friend is of us. Their character is far more reliable, actually, to be true to what they are than humanity, as far as I see it. There are so many areas in which our change of consciousness will change the results. And yes, there there is the relationship, it seems symbiotic, between the body and the mind, but the body affects the mind because we allow it to, not because that's just so much the natural state. And we can always decide to learn how to overcome that. And a lot of people who do this have results that are called healing through prayer and things like that, where you take and change the fundamental things about the physical body. And this goes on all the time. There was one, I forget the type of doctor he is, the one who works on the back and injuries to the back. No, he was a surgeon. Osteopath, yeah. He wrote a book. And he had started observing that people would come in after they had injuries to their back, and they would have this terrible pain they kept complaining about. And he began to realize that more often than not, the injury they had nothing to do with the pain. That the injury they had was simply the excuse for the subconscious to let that pain out for something it couldn't deal with straight out. And so he started putting these people through therapy to realize this and come in touch with what was really causing that pain. And 90-some-odd% of them lost their pain. It was just a remarkable experience. I forget that doctor's name. It was a fascinating book to read. But we are far more mental than physical. The way I look at it is that what you think is out there is what your projector of consciousness is projecting out there. And give you a perfect example of that. If the laws of physics and physiology are true, you cannot violate them. But they're violated all the time. And one example, I think I've used this before, I was listening to the radio news in the 60s, I think it was. A German paratrooper went out of an airplane at 3,500 feet over Rhein-Main Air Force Base outside of Wiesbaden, Germany, and the chute didn't open. And he fell smack dab in the middle of the concrete runway. Well, that evening, when the astonished reporters were interviewing him in his hospital bed, they said, "How in the world did you survive that?" They were just astonished. And he said, "Well, our instructor taught us how to land right. And he taught us that if we did land right, we could survive any fall. I knew how to land right. I knew I was going to land right, and I knew I was going to survive." And that energy and that picture and the projection of his mind created a different future for him. And we're all capable of that. We all have tools in our toolbox mentally that are beyond the imagination. We have whatever we need to solve any problem right now. We just are taught not to believe it. We're so dumbed down, thinking that this material existence is really the true reality of life. And it's not. It's a projection of collective human consciousness. I'm completely convinced of that. Anyway, that goes on and on.
The last one standing. Anyway, is there next? Looks like we've used up, everybody's had something to say. I want to thank our speaker for being here tonight. I think he did a great job. And I think, and we'll let our speaker close this out. You get to comment all the comment and close this meeting. You get the last word.
Well, I really love the comments when we were talking about, it seemed like a theme for a minute was Russia, and how the compassion that I was hearing everyone talk about, how maybe they're not rude, but maybe they're just really traumatized. I think that's very true. And are people angry? Are they jerks? Or are they suffering from PTSD? It's a great comment. I like it. And let's take that into here in the U.S. and here in Texas, and we look at kids. You know, former educator is kind of the same thing. Maybe they're grumpy, maybe they're rude, or maybe they've had PTSD, maybe they suffered. That affects how they walk and how they think. And I love the comments I heard before about nature and frequency. A great book, which I'm sure you've read, is Heart Math, and it talks about the frequencies our heart literally sends out whenever we have or experience an emotion. And they studied and proved it through science. And the ideas of capacity that we can do. Sure, this is the intro speech of reduce your stress, you feel better. But I've seen and know through my own experiences and working with people who are trained that you can do almost anything with your body. And I've seen that where you can break sticks on people's arms, you can reverse disease through concentration and meditation, many phenomenal things. Research is still building on it though, so whenever I represent Marula Medical, I'm always very cautious about that because we're a medical practice. But the research is building, and I think the more that we all think about it, talk about it, and try it, the more likely that's going to move forward much quicker. And that's what we need. Thank you.
Well, that's it for tonight. Our they close here, I think, at 10:30, so our speaker will be here in case you want to talk to him for a little while, and see you next week. Thank you.
Appreciate the great experience.